And now our wives are going to tell us we're ridiculous, but our parents will tell us how proud they are of us. So I just want to give a shout out to Michael. Mike's celebrating his 25th year at the synagogue. We are so proud of you, Mike. So 25 years serving your congregation. And actually, we're doing these morning musings, which are meant as a spiritual kickstart to the week, or honest reflections about spirituality and our Jewish faith. I actually started doing these about a month ago. It's my brother's idea, and I want to thank him for the idea for these Monday musings. And so he interviewed me for the first one that I did, and now I'm going to interview you, Mike. So we've been talking about prayer, and Mike and I thought we would actually look at social justice and where social justice fits in our faith and our Judaism. Of course, we've been rocked by the racial injustices in our country, the killing of George Floyd by people who are supposed to protect us by the police. We've had almost 2 weeks of protests. And for many of us, this has been an awakening of the racial injustices in our country. And so, Mike, I wanted to start with you. You went to a protest a few days ago, and I wanted you to share with us about that experience and what motivated you to go in particular, and where that fits in your faith.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be doing this together, of course, Stephen. Always fun to teach together, share together, and sharing our rabbinate as well in a fun way like this, an important way like this. So on Thursday, there was a clergy protest in Detroit. So some of my Black colleagues, pastors, invited us to come, us rabbis in our community. And about 10 of us, the Michigan Board of Rabbis, were there. Representing Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. And that was a very powerful moment to see how we could come together in that way. You know, there are a lot of protests going on, of course, in our community in Detroit, a lot of them that were concerning and were out of hand and even turned violent. And so you didn't always feel safe. I was very pleased that we had an opportunity to be a part of something where we felt like we were really in the community and engaged. There are many more Black individuals, clergy, who are marching than white. So it felt even more important to be doing that. Someone asked why we were wearing our tali tot. And even though it was a protest march, a peaceful protest march, the idea was to show others that we're Jewish and that we were sort of representing our Jewish values of social justice and what we found to be really important. So though sort of peculiar wearing a tallis midday, walking down the street in Detroit, it was also a statement of who we are. And for, priests, ministers, they were wearing, imams were there too, wearing their different clerical robes and things. And so it was nice to have people recognize us as Jews. And it was interesting, people would walk by us and say, Shalom! And like, oh, how'd you know? And then realize what was going on. But
so did you go because you were asked, or was this like really, where did this come from, inside of you to go?
As soon as I heard about it, I wanted to go, right? And so it was the night before, the afternoon before, I was made aware of this one. A Black minister that I'm close with, Ken Flowers, he and I were talking, and he mentioned it to me as well. And he was disappointed that he had a funeral at 11 o'clock that day. He couldn't go. So he said, okay, you're marching for me. We're going together. And I thought that was really cool too. So as soon as I found this march as one that really seemed to resonate with us, and being with people who I knew as well, and I could go with my colleague, Rabbi Daniel, it made sense to go. I wanted to be able to do something, but I didn't want to just jump into a random march either. This weekend, there were so many in our community. There's a car march down Woodward Avenue, right? And so people felt very safe, but thousands doing that. Really a great statement that people, Black and white together, are showing this is a real concern. There's a lot of work we need to be doing.
Yeah, so I mean, both of us have gone to many protests, and I certainly have gone to a great many in these past several years. And I'm trying to figure out where does protest fit in, fixing this and addressing some of the problems that we're talking about, we both are we want to be advocates for change. We want to see meaningful change. And so, this is an issue I think that you and I have not focused on in the same way as we focused on other social justice issues. So what more can we do in addition to protesting, in addition to marching, and in addition to standing with others? I mean, the power of a protest is that you're standing with thousands of others or 10,000s of others, and the volume of people. It's not your solitary voice, it's that you're combining it with so many others, and that's what makes the statement. But we have positions where we can actually try to, perhaps move the needle. So how do we do that?
It's interesting. I think there's this platform that when we get to be a part of something and people recognize that we're showing others that this matters to us, right? You and I together went to Washington, D.C. During the genocide in Darfur and protested there and stood with, I don't know, tens of thousands of people, right? Elie Wiesel was there, George Clooney was there, Paul Rusesabagina was there. It was an amazing experience. And bringing that home with us and talking about it and how important we saw that at that moment, and writing postcards and raising money and teaching about it, I think did begin to move that. So again, protests matter because it's putting these voices together, but it's something we take home. Like it's this constant reminder. Okay, I stood there and walked with friends and walked with people I didn't know. I met new people. I walked with this one black pastor who I never met before, minister in Detroit. His grandfather of 8, and he talked to me about what he hopes for his children, his own experiences that I can't fathom, right? And we walked over half of it. It was a 4-mile walk. Over half of it we did together, and that was something that was very special because it was an opportunity to meet someone new, someone different in my life, and I really appreciated his openness in that way. So all of those experiences we bring home, and we're blessed to have these pulpits, these platforms to talk about it more and more. And I think that's a beginning. I think, though, we also have so much to learn, right? Like you taught me, or you told me, we've watched it for a while. Brian Stevenson's been this amazing teacher to us. And when his book came out, I think 4 years ago, Just Mercy, how powerful that was in our home and for my children too. But when he talked about the museum that he envisioned when he was creating, you got to go to the museum in Alabama and have talked about it so much. And I really want to go. And last week I pitched the idea to Pastor Flowers, let's go together. He hadn't been yet either. And let's bring people from our congregation, because you talked about how much you learned in that experience. Like, we are so unaware as white Americans still. And even I'm saying that candidly. Like, I think I know and I understand, but there's so much of it. I saw you post on Facebook a movie that we were watching too, 13th on Netflix, which
Right.
I think Ellie told us to watch it. And
Well, Shir told us to watch it, by the way.
Right.
So we're learning a lot from our children.
Yeah. So much we don't know.
But I think, again, as I said to you, our trip to the museum, the Legacy Museum in Montgomery was, and then we went this past summer. So it's almost a year ago that we went. It was embarrassingly revelatory. How did I, not know this? But I want to go, going back to the protest that we went to against Darfur, that was about stopping something over there. And here we're talking about, systemic, problems. And it feels, so much larger and so much more embedded and so much more difficult to actually change. I have a great deal of faith in the relationship that you've just built, or the friendships that you made. And if that's something that emerges from a protest, that is something I could really hold some faith in. I mean, both of us know that it was the friendship between Abraham Joshua Heschel and Martin Luther King that really was part of what was so decisive. We remember that image of the two of them marching arm in arm, but behind the scenes, it was this deep friendship and respect for each other. that really, I think helped to move that sea change in the 60s. But looking back now, we realize there's so much more we have to do, and I'm not sure. This is part of my question. I'm not sure really even where to begin. Where do we start?
Hmm.
What do we start to fix first? And it feels and looks so small. So
Well, uh, it is overwhelming. I often feel that way with social action, social justice. It's overwhelming, and that I'm not doing enough personally, that we're not doing enough as a community. I think it was 2 years ago when, and not to shift our conversation, but it was during some of the immigration crisis and the challenges and the camps have been set up, and it was so discouraging. And I felt like here I am in the beauty of our suburban life, and why aren't I in Texas? There's more work we can do. Isn't this what it means for me to be a rabbi, to be an advocate in this way in social justice, and to really be on the ground doing that kind of work? And I still believe that to some degree, but I also realize we can do good work from here in teaching and sharing and motivating others to be involved in that way too. And so maybe that's what this is. It's not just for show. I think sometimes, and with civil rights and the injustice and the systemic racism, we've done things, blacks and Jews together, but I think sometimes it's been for show. Like it's a nice pulpit exchange or something like that, and it feels good for a moment, right? But the reality of what we want to do, what we see as a systemic change now, has to go much deeper than that. Has to be something that we recognize. That was show. What can we do to really foundationally change who we are and how we understand one another? Right?
yeah,
I mean, Pastor Flowers last week said to me, he said, remember, the police were created in our country to, discipline, to keep in check the black community. So there's this underlying distrust that exists there, right? Like you said in the beginning, like this is our part of society that's supposed to protect us. And you wrote about it last Thursday in your Torah thoughts really well about how we white Americans take Steve's Torah thoughts are excellent. To my congregation, if you want to read them, you'll probably hear me talk about them on Saturdays. But anyway, so just kidding. But the Steve talked about being in in the clerk's office, the county clerk's office, paying a ticket for someone else in his family, I'm sure, and noticing that he was the only white person there. Everyone else was a person of color. And
you've exaggerated the story a little bit, but as you often do.
The point being, though, that have the police, identified and taken a part of society to make easy prey, in a sense, right? And to give tickets to much easier than someone who, quote, fits in like we do, right? And I think that's the concern that we have.
So, I want to sort of offer some reflections. It's been something I've been thinking about. I mean, both of us really believe that social justice is really important. I know that, we believe if our Judaism just stays in the sanctuary, then it hasn't, and if it doesn't go out into the world and doesn't offer some measure of repair, if it doesn't force us to do good, then it really hasn't, then it's not a deep faith. But the other reflection is that, Abraham Joshua Heschel wasn't a synagogue rabbi. He didn't have a congregation to care for. And the sense of that prophetic Judaism, being a prophet and not the prophets of old did not have congregations. They didn't have, and they also did not have a lot of people who were listening to them in their own day and age. We read them thousands of years later. We read Isaiah and we find meaning in them, but they weren't really listened to by their contemporaries. I mean, it's really hard to be a prophet and to affect change in your own generation, in your own time. So I had this idea as you were talking, because I really was moved by the friendship or relationship that you started building on the protests and the relationships that you have. I think, some of this could be solved because we're not listening well enough. We don't know enough. about these racial injustices. Maybe we, I don't know how we begin a listening campaign, but it's almost like maybe it would be easier with the coronavirus. Everyone's on their computers. Maybe we could figure out a way that we could talk to people. It's not, you're not going over to each other's homes for dinner. So it's all, perhaps it would be easier to have the conversations, online, so that we can begin to listen and we can begin to learn, and we can begin to find out more. Because I really believe that we just don't know enough. And I also just don't know where to begin. But I do know I have to learn more, and I have to listen better. Because there's our fellow Americans are in pain, and we're not doing enough as their brethren to fix this.
I agree with you completely, but I also think that we're compelled to feel like right now we got to do something. Like this is so urgent, and while that's true, I think real change will take a lot of time, and our work has to be something we commit to, and it isn't something we're going to do tomorrow. It's something we're going to be doing for the long, and that we're going to build upon, right? And so we're not just going to have one program, this week to fix this or even alleviate our guilt in a sense, right? We're going to continue. We have to continue to work on this. And one thing I read this past week was that we feel this real sense of urgency, and that's good, but it isn't just right now. We can't just jump into it, right? Because we'll just do a flash in the pan then. This has to be something that we commit to. And like you said, listening. It's funny. I was not planning on reading Jacob Marcus's last book. This is the founder of American Jewish history, right? Our professor who died in 1995 at the age of 99. He lived American Jewish history, right? And these are his documents. This is the last book he published. And literally, this was like sitting on my shelf just now and this weekend. And I was like, oh, why is that there? And it's out of place. And all of these documents are, from the 17th, 18th, 19th century are these ethical documents about like who we are. And one was Julius Oakes, a congregational rabbi, who he's talking to his congregation, but his children too. And he said, the mission I undertook as a shepherd of my flock, right, is to hold on to your faith because it will make our world a better place. That our faith, our Judaism, is reminding us constantly that this mission of social justice underlying everything. And so when someone's in pain, we have that responsibility. And so that's what we commit to.
All right. Thank you very much.
Wow. Well, I know, look, Steven is dressed very nicely this morning because he has a bat mitzvah to get to on this Monday morning of Torah reading as well. So to Jolie, we wish her a mazel tov on this morning as they're making up bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs that haven't occurred. We haven't started the Mondays yet. I'm not recommending that to Temple Shir Shalom right now. Anyway, thanks, Steven. Always good teaching together.
Hey, great seeing you, Mike. Hope to see you in person soon.